Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, July 27th, 2020. Time for another show. Totally not ready, but what can you do? It's end of the weekend. Not a terribly crazy one. I guess they let the wacko in chief out for some golf. That contented him for most of the weekend. A little bit of rage tweeting towards the end on Sunday. I didn't really catch wind of most of what he was doing until after the fact, which is fine. I've never actually followed the president on Twitter. I've followed other people who followed him and retweeted their confusion or consternation at his anger tweeting, but little else. And I haven't lost anything for having done it either. So I recommend that you do it if you still, for some reason, follow the president. I noticed this morning that I guess we're all having the same thing happen with him pretty much. I just happened to see Molly Jong-Fast tweeting in response to Jake Tapper and saying this morning, Trump's Twitter doesn't seem to have the same power it used to, but the Republicans are still terrified of it. Why did she say it? Well, all I can say is, she was inspired by Jake Tapper's tweet. I guess something about last night. Just noting here, Jake saying, honestly, the second worst thing about the president attacking me on Twitter, I missed it entirely, after the sad statement made about his focus and how wrong he is about the pandemic, that's what must have happened, he says the saddest thing is that I didn't even know what happened until 3 hours later. No one called, no one emailed. It's just noise. And I think that's largely true of what's going on with a lot of his rage tweeting. People have kind of turned it off. This is good timing for this. Hope it stays that way during the election. I also, of course, didn't see Jake Tapper make any statement about the president's focus and how wrong he is about the pandemic. But what would I need Jake Tapper to make that comment for? It's pretty obvious to all who care to observe it, and is no mystery to any of us. All right, let's see. Having a little difficulty with one of the second screens here, trying to get everything lined up, and for whatever reason, it doesn't want to connect to anything but Twitter. So I guess maybe, is there really any reason to connect to anything but Twitter? All right, well, let's see. Let's catch up on everything this morning. Here's Bill in Portland with all of his morning kickoff tweets here. Daily Co's Radio is live now. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, returns to the broadcast booth. I suppose you could call this a booth. After spending his 0th weekend golfing while the country burns to the ground. That's true. I haven't been golfing during the actual fire at least for quite some time anyway. I don't know when the last time I actually went out golfing was. I wouldn't mind it. But who knows? Anyway, such a poor example for our children, I swear. Thanks a lot. Gee whiz. Well, I don't know. So far, pretty good example, I think. Really, he's just kidding. I'm staying home. Kids stay home. It's what they should be doing. School districts around the country finding out just how dangerous it is to force the kids back into school and then getting an early start on it. One of the stories I noticed this weekend, although I'm not certain that I definitely put it aside, but I can certainly dig it up for you, was the story of Alcoa, Tennessee, wherein they, look at this. Once again, hold on a second, Greg. This is going to take me a second to get this right. There we go. Okay, finally. All right, found it. I'm glad I could connect it without having to recall you this morning, Greg. So things are going well-ish on this side. This time the computer was willing to note if I searched for it that you were calling, but it wouldn't pop up the window this morning. So still not, I think it's doing it out of spite at this point. I don't know what I should be, should I be feeding this thing something? Is that what's...
Feed me.
Yeah, maybe that's it. I'll just finish the one sentence. The long story short here, Alcoa, Tennessee, for whatever reason, I don't know whether they open their schools early all the time or they were opening earlier because of the loss of time last year, but they opened their schools last week and even more baffling, they opened their schools on Wednesday of last week. Not really sure exactly why they decided to do that, but I know why they decided to close them, because by Friday they were emailing out that, we have cases of COVID in our little school system here in Alcoa. No answer as to why they opened at that point. Actually, now that I think about it, I don't think the story that I have says that they did close the schools again. They were simply notifying everybody that they had a case, and I think it was just one case of COVID. I don't know how big the school system is, though, and that might be enough to shut that school, or I don't know. We'll keep an eye on it. I don't know whether Alcoa, Tennessee is dominated by a aluminum plant or something. Maybe that's why Alcoa, or unless that means something in some Native American language that I don't know about. But we'll see. Keeping an eye on a place you never thought you'd be keeping an eye on, Alcoa, Tennessee. All right. There are other things that happen.
There's always Miami. I mean, the multiple Florida Marlins players test positive for COVID-19.
Oh,
and so it gives you an idea of they pulled those players, but I think the team played anyway. But, there's enough players that were tested and were positive, at least 4. You have to think there's some community spread within the team. So having them play is pretty stupid. It's pretty effed up. Yeah. And it'll give you an idea of how things are going.
They should all just stay out there in the field. In the field, they're nicely distanced. It's
14-day quarantine and all that, but no, because baseball.
Yeah, they had the same problem with basketball. They were bringing everybody. When were they bringing everyone to Disney World?
But basketball at least has this bubble where they could do tests that normal humans can't. I guess baseball can do tests that normal humans can't, but they don't have the same kind of bubble.
Oh, well.
I mean, the Toronto Blue Jays were kicked out of Toronto, for example, to play.
Yes, that's
Buffalo.
right. Yeah, I did notice that they. I think the article I read said they were opting to play most of their home games in Buffalo rather than Toronto, and then down in the rest of the story was Canada won't let them back in. So you're playing in, it's nice. I'm sure the people in Buffalo are enjoying it, but and I don't know whether the people of Toronto missed the Blue Jays or not.
Yeah, that's like saying Ted Yoho resigned from a board of directorship because he insulted AOC.
Yes.
He didn't resign. He got kicked off.
I chose to take their advice to leave immediately.
I chose to be fired.
Right. Well, it would have been interesting to see him stand his ground against the police. Maybe we could have sent federal officers to whack him over the head. But he's smart, and he left. And, I'm just kidding. He's not smart. But he did leave.
But he left that particular board, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So the pundit roundup this morning was based on polls and what the polls tell you and what they don't. There was really, a whole kind of mini debate, a little meta debate about what all these things mean when you have, for example, the economists saying that there's only a 7%, 6%, 8%, 9% chance of Trump winning the election, and that Biden has a 93, 92, 91, what does all that mean? And, here's what it means. If you're between 80 and 99%, you're likely to win.
Yes.
And there's really no difference between 91 and 97. That's like saying there's a 96.4% chance. I just made this up. If you're 99 plus, then you're certain to win. Nobody's saying certainty.
Okay.
Nobody ever says certainty in politics. But pretty likely is pretty likely. And it's not that much of a difference between 80 to 99%. It's a band. And the way Will Jordan describes it is, look, think of it as Biden very likely to win, Biden likely to win, tied, Trump likely to win, Trump very likely to win. Sure. And those are, like 20-point bands there. So pick the bandwidth that you're in and just say something about it. And don't get hung up about whether it's 91 or 95. Or as I got into a discussion, not an argument, but a discussion with somebody at Daily Kos on one of my previous pieces, I don't see a difference between 93 to 99. And the statisticians say, yes, there is. But that's a literal reading.
I guess so, yeah. I mean,
not,
if your rules
not
bound,
a serious reading.
Well, this is a 93. That's an A, and 98 is an A plus. So, some people differentiate.
But
I guess
not on an English paper, right?
Because
I don't know. In English papers where I was growing up, you only got a 99. That was the top grade because the theory was you did something wrong.
I have seen that exercise.
Whereas you can get 100 on a math test, but you can't get 100 on an English paper.
Yes.
Nobody writes the perfect paper.
I guess that's true. Although, I don't know, it'd be fun. In some of the higher maths, they could just say, you got a 99. Oh, I didn't get anything wrong. Well, not yet, you didn't. We'll see.
But you will.
Yeah, eventually you'll be
or you
proven
have,
wrong.
or something.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is Biden's doing fairly well. Now, Center for Politics posted this screenshot that I started the pundit roundup with, 2016 through mid-June, 44 polls done, 2016. Average Democratic lead was 5.7, and the number of polls percentage with a Democratic lead was 84%.
Okay.
And 2016 through the election, that didn't change. It was still the number of polls with a Democratic lead, 84%, although the lead narrowed from 5.7 to 4.7.
Yes.
But the percentage of polls with Democratic lead was still 84%, even though the average Democratic lead dropped a point.
I see.
In 2020 through mid-June,
I think. Yeah.
there have been 72 polls, not 44. The average lead is 5.9, not 5.7. 5.9, not 5.7.
All right.
But 94% of the polls have a Democratic lead.
That's okay. That's 10% more. Well, it's not 10%.
And the percent of polls with the
higher.
Republican lead is like 1%. The rest are tied. So it's a better year. It's not 2016. It's not
that's true.
Dukakis years,
It's not that either.
where Dukakis trailed over the summer but then had a huge convention bounce. I'm not sure that we have convention bounces anymore. I'm not even sure we have conventions anymore. And I'm not sure that after a convention the bounce is positive or negative. How do you know? It's never happened before.
Yeah, a negative bounce.
We never had. Well, Trump could come on and he has his negative convention and he just drops more.
I guess it's possible. I mean, I know it's all down to boat parades now. That much I figured out.
Joe Biden has never had a boat parade.
That's right. That's true.
And that's even worse than yard signs.
They were pushing that hard. Yeah, that's right. I've been outflanked on the dumb side by boat parades. This is crazy. I thought I had staked out the best possible position.
But that's far from the dumbest
signs.
thing I read today.
Oh, well then, we better get moving.
The dumbest thing I read today, before we get back to the polls and what they really show, is this Politico piece. She had no remorse why Kamala Harris isn't a lock for VP.
Oh.
Nobody disputes she's the front runner to be Biden's number 2, but there are lingering doubts primarily over the issue of trust. Who says so? Chris Dodd.
Chris Dodd.
Yeah, the old white guy with presidential ambitions. You may remember in 2007, we were in Chicago together, I believe, and Chris Dodd was on stage debating.
Yeah, right. You're making this out to be my fault?
I'm just saying you remember that.
Oh, yeah, okay. I was
Chris
there.
Dodd had presidential ambitions, and here he is, an old white dude, telling a black woman she's too ambitious, because that's what the article says.
All right,
he was taken aback because she didn't have any remorse for her attack during the primary. She blew it off and said, oh, well, it's politics, because she attacked Biden early on.
Yeah.
That failed, you recall.
What was her attack? I don't recall the attack anymore. I mean, I'm sure if you said
but you recall it happened and she failed.
Yeah, well, she's not
that
the
girl
nominee.
was me.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
About busing. Remember that?
Yeah, but only barely.
But only vaguely, because it's
Chris Dodd remembers it.
Chris Dodd remembers it, and he was just taken aback because she didn't show more remorse. It's basically a stupid article that shows that Chris Dodd is a jerk. The rest of the article points out just how good a fit Harris is.
Well,
but the bottom line for all of that really is that there's a couple of criteria you need, a couple of 4 criteria you need to be vice president. You need to, in no specific order, do no harm, to be loyal, to play attack dog when needed, and you have to be ready to be president.
Okay.
Harris is a great fit on all of those things. So are a bunch of others. I don't really care who he picks.
Yeah, I guess you got.
But Chris Dodd is a jerk.
Right? How much is he chair of the search committee or something?
Something like that.
Oh, well.
And has a big mouth and was talking to the media, which he shouldn't be doing.
That's what happens with senators. Okay.
And former Senator Chris Dodd, a member of Joe Biden's Vice Presidential Search Committee, recently asked Kamala Harris about her ambush on Biden in the first Democratic debate. Notice the phrasing there and how it's set up. Dodd was stunned by her response. She laughed and said that's politics. She had no remorse. Dodd told a longtime Biden supporter and donor who relayed the exchange to Politico on condition of anonymity.
Oh. Okay.
Dodd felt it was a gimmick, that it was cheap. The donor said, if there's anybody who's dumber about politics in the world, It's a donor.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess that's
They
well,
know
that's
nothing,
talk radio
but pay
call.
money and feel like therefore they know everything.
Like the guys on the, like you said, you're on the radio by virtue of your having dialed and waited a long time.
Right, or you are,
Of course, that's how you're on
the
right now,
ambassador
isn't
to
it?
Iceland who wears a bulletproof vest and goes around thinking people are going to try to knife him.
Yes, right. Well, we've both
How
been
did he
to
get there?
Iceland.
He's a donor.
That's right, and it happens in all
I want to
administrations.
ask that
but-
guy his opinion on politics. He sounds real sharp.
Yeah, that one was a surprise of a story. We both know that donors frequently get ambassadorships in all administrations. True, but they're usually happy to be where they have asked to go. And two, we've both been to Iceland, and we know what kind of chances you stand of being knifed or blown up on your way to the office or shot. He wanted to carry a gun. He wanted an armored
Iceland.
limo. It doesn't go like
the biggest risk you have in Iceland is you could fall off a volcano because there's no rails.
They will let you. Yes.
Or you might be driving on a two-way road that all of a sudden turns one way and you don't know what the rules are.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or
be.
you're driving on one of those roads and it gets all of a sudden foggy. I mean, these things happen in Iceland, but
Right. But you can't shoot
shot and knife? No, not likely.
No, and Reykjavik is no place to try to be driving a hulking armored car either. But a lot of cities are like that in Europe. And
Anyway, so no,
Yeah.
don't tell me about donors. The article
Okay.
goes and points out, and I quote, people in 3 other competing camps privately said that while the candidates have a shot at VP, Harris is more likely than not to get the nod. I mean, I don't even know what the purpose of the article was except to do smear stuff and Dems in disarray.
oh well, that's
But or unless you really don't like
season.
Dodd, in which case it did
Oh,
a great job
I
because it
hadn't-
makes Dodd look like a jerk.
I hadn't thought about that. There's no real reason to be. I couldn't think of any reason to sabotage Chris Dodd at this point, but it's been done. So
Well, he's there, so that's
Yeah.
a good enough reason.
all right, well,
In any case,
Strange.
what's really going on,
yes.
let me just give you some polls that came out and then talk about, here was my
Anything.
approach that I took. I said,
Oh.
this is a political site, Daily Kos. We like analyzing polls. That
True.
doesn't mean the numbers are the only story. So for those of you who get PTSD from looking at the polls, buck up. A therapeutic intervention is on the way. We're going to explain why the polls look the way they are. Like the Quinnipiac poll, right? The one with the Biden plus 13 lead in Florida.
Yes, I worry.
With
that
other
it's a
polls
Q
today
poll.
coming out saying Biden is leading in Florida. Not as much, but, leading. So Governor DeSantis received a negative 41.52% job approval in that Quinnipiac poll, in the Q poll. A 31-point swing in the net approval from April.
31 from April. What month is it? It's
From
July.
April till now, it's July, in 4 months.
Wow.
31-point swing in DeSantis. Now he has negative approval. Why? Because of coronavirus.
Ah, yes, I had heard about that.
Right? Harry Anton says Trump is behind in a state no Republican has won the presidency without in 96 years. We're talking about Florida here, which is
Wow.
as close to must win for Trump as any bellwether state. Biden hasn't trailed in a poll since winter.
Ah. Wow.
Okay, here's this
well,
Washington Post piece
okay.
that came out.
Yes.
Coronavirus ravaged Florida as Ron DeSantis sidelined scientists and followed Trump. And talks about the fact that the University of Florida research scientist whose regular calls with the health department ended at the end of June. I never received information about what happened with my ideas or any results, but I did hear the governor say the models were wrong.
Well, he liked to say that, yeah.
Right? DeSantis traveled to Miami to hold a roundtable with South Florida mayors whose region was struggling and still is struggling as a novel coronavirus hotspot. But the Republican
Yes.
mayor of Hialeah was shut out weeks after saying the governor hadn't done much for a city disproportionately affected by the virus.
Yeah.
And as the virus spread out of control in Florida, decision-making became increasingly shaped by politics and divorced from scientific evidence, according to interviews with 64 current and former state and administration officials, health administrators, epidemiologists, political operatives, and hospital executives. The crisis in Florida, these observers say, has revealed the shortcomings of a response built on shifting metrics, influenced by a small group of advisors and tethered at every stage to the Trump administration, which has no unified plan for readdressing the national health emergency, but has pushed for states to reopen. So if you assume the virus, I wrote, is a messaging problem, you're going to get it wrong, very wrong, and you're going to keep getting it wrong. That's what's happening in Florida. People know that. 61% of voters in the Q poll think Governor DeSantis reopened the economy too quickly.
Yes.
And the Washington Post goes on to say Trump asked DeSantis in a phone call in May whether he would require masks for the convention and whether the virus would be a problem.
Yeah.
And DeSantis said he wouldn't require a mask and the virus would not be a major problem for August. So the point is people know who to blame and they know why. And the polls are just picking up on the details. That's all. Don't get hung up with the polls in terms of, oh, it's a number. It's this likely band here. And the likely band is people likely understand that Trump is to blame and DeSantis to a certain extent because he's mini Trump.
Yeah.
And that's why the polls say what they say. CNN polls, Michigan plus 12, 52-40. Note it's over 50. That's CNN for Biden. Florida, 51-46. That's a 5-point lead. Again, 51% for Biden. And Arizona, 49-45, a plus 4. That's CNN polls of battleground states. NBC Marist, Arizona, shows Biden ahead by 5, 50-45, again hitting the magic 50. And that was 47-46 in March, so that's an improvement for Biden. If you want to know overall, how are the protests going and how is the coronavirus stuff going and what's the overall picture? The overall picture is Biden lead grows. Okay. New NBC poll in North Carolina, President Biden 51, again hitting the 50 mark, Trump 44. And by the way, in the Senate, Cunningham 50, Tillis 41.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So as Mike Godwin says, look, people, if I seem more irritable lately, it turns out that's Godwin's law. Godwin. Oh. It turns out that a bunch of basically peaceful protesters are being kidnapped and forced into unmarked vans and cars by militarized anonymous police cosplayers.
Yes. Tell me more.
The idea that this is somehow going to win the election for Trump, not reflected in the polls. And you know what? I don't really care if you poll defund the police and how that polls, or what about protesters in Portland, plus or minus. The overall picture is Trump is losing. It's not helping him.
All right.
What is happening is the Republican gentry are getting annoyed with voters.
Oh, those
right?
pesky voters.
And that's why the GOP is just having so much trouble coming up with a benefits package that was due last week, is supposed to be out today, is dead on arrival because Pelosi's having none of it. And in the New York Magazine, Eric Levitz wrote this up, the GOP's procrastination on COVID relief is inexcusable. Why did Republicans fail to rally behind McConnell's outline, forcing the majority leader to abandon the bill's rollout on Thursday morning? The answer to both questions appears to be this.
Yeah.
Why did McConnell wait, and why did the GOP not go along with it? Because many congressional Republicans earnestly believe that the reason unemployment is high in the middle of an uncontained pandemic that's killing 1,000 people a day is that the excessive generosity of federal benefits has rendered the unemployed unwilling to work.
That's largely.
So when you think the little people are failing you, you're perfectly willing to fail the little people, is my point.
All you people who aren't going back to work because there's still a coronavirus.
And again, I go back to the point that one of the reasons the GOP is doing so badly is not only are they incapable of governance, but they're also really stupid.
I guess.
You have to be really stupid to think that the reason people aren't going back to work is because the benefits are too big.
Yeah, it's really great, like eating canned food. It's wonderful.
It's insane.
Yeah. I mean, but then again, we are talking about people who, a good portion of the people making that decision, if it's a decision at all, are still of the belief that there isn't a virus. Or that it's all a hoax,
like I said,
or that it's only a flu. Like you said. You're right. Okay, so...
Anyway, Cam Joseph, reporter. Trump also trails consistently in Arizona, Florida, down slightly in North Carolina, and the dead heat in Iowa, Ohio, Texas, Georgia. Not even clear it's down slightly in North Carolina anymore. Proof his campaign is worried. They're spending on ads in all of those states. This is putting the Senate once a stretch for Democrats easily in reach. But the biggest surprise in my reporting, both Democrats and Republicans tell me the John Cornyn race is a lot closer than public polling. And if Trump loses Texas, Cornyn's in real trouble.
Well, yeah. That would be awesome. I mean, sure.
Tom Frieden points out, listen, any community can open schools. Only a community that controls COVID and is careful about how it opens the schools can keep them open. So we've discussed this on the show. You have school-age kids. I no longer do, but you do. And so the whole idea here is that somehow or other, the biggest issue in politics is how much you're going to pay people who are unemployed, when in fact, the biggest issue in politics is what's going to happen with the schools. And when it doesn't go well, when it goes like the Florida Marlins, who's going to be blamed?
I think them. Yeah, well, I don't know what to tell you about the school. The school thing has been interesting to watch as we were watching, and I guess we'll just see more of it in the weeks to come of school systems abandoning their plans to open.
They have
saying,
to. Here's one. The school attended by President Trump's son will not fully reopen in September out of concern of the coronavirus pandemic.
Well,
here's one from the Washington Post. Held back as parents realize how badly the U.S. botched the next school year. We're furious. Now, you have all that stuff. That's why the polls show what they poll. So don't hawk me about whether or not it's 93 or 99%. It doesn't matter. Trump is losing badly on these things. And by the way, if you tell me there's a lifetime left in politics and you just ignore these polls, I'm going to ask you, what's going to reverse the opinion of voters dealing with pandemics, the economy, and school closing? An ad? An appearance on Barstool Sports? Firing the campaign manager? Canceling the Florida convention? After canceling the North Carolina convention?
Those things.
Portland cosplay?
Yes.
I mean, it's one thing to say the polls can change, and it's another thing to say people are going to shrug and say, oh, well, 4 more years of this.
Yeah, well, we'll all get used to it. Eventually, it'll be the new normal. And
then finally on polling, we can do this before the break.
Yeah.
Before this is, because this is a good time to use on a Saturday night, Ariel Edwards-Levy, who writes polling for Huffington Post, said, I just want to put out this 2016 postmortem from the pollsters' professional organization, full disclosure, I'm a member, she says, which examines in depth the possibility for shy Trump voters. No evidence.
Oh.
None.
They don't appear to be all that shy, I got to tell you.
That's my point. They're not shy at all.
They're wearing Nazi flags as masks. They're beating up the campaign managers of opposing congressional campaigns. I don't see the shy. It's just not coming through. You're going to have to try harder. Show me that you can do it. Emote. Okay, thanks very much. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And we're in our second segment. Greg's still here, raring to go, and still got a pile of stories, I guess. We got to get through these
Well,
things.
the CBS Decision Desk Election and Survey Unit, Kabir K period, has a nice little 3 or 4 tweet summary here of what's going on, and has this marvelous graph that we've looked at before in a different context. Trends we're seeing, he says, in CBS News YouGov battleground tracker data that help explain Biden's current advantage. The main driver seems to be white voters unhappy with Trump, and this includes a variety of different demographic groups borne out by both the latest U.S. poll and their simulations.
All right. Look at this graph. Okay.
MRP is one of those simulated poll techniques they use to build models. Got to distinguish current margins and gains from past. Trump leads white men by double digits, but Biden has cut into his margin even more than with white women. Yeah, white women with college degrees dislike Trump, but Biden gains with white non-college men at least as big. Now, some surveys suggest recent movement among seniors, but among white seniors, we've seen Trump ahead by 17 points in spring.
Okay.
Right? Exit polling in 16 showed plus 19, so that's not much of a difference. Both latest poll and statistical model using all our July data from YouGov show a double-digit Democratic gain with younger white voters, that is to say less than 45.
All right.
Remember, we've talked about this on the show, 45 to 65 is one of the most frustrating categories of voters in terms of being stubbornly Republican.
Yes, we have.
Right?
Sad.
They don't move all that much.
Why?
But it's the younger voters under 45 that are incredibly anti-Trump. They just had to show up and vote, of course, but they have. They did in 18.
Yeah.
Also,
more of them.
asymmetric defection, and these are the fascinating sort of arrow polls or graphs or charts that show, okay, here's Clinton's 16 voters, and here's Biden's much bigger group compared to Clinton's 16. And where did these votes come from? A small but significant amount of Biden's new voters came from Trump's 16 voters. That is to say, 5 to 7% of Trump's 16 voters are now voting for Biden. That's why we take the trouble to try to persuade them. And only 2% of Clinton voters are voting for Trump, which is what we saw in 18 with good results.
All right.
But here's the key. The biggest by far is not from the other voters in 16, the Jill Stein voters, et cetera. There's a small amount that are voting for Biden there. And in each one of these categories, if you look, Biden's getting more of these than Trump is. But in October 16, people who voted for other than the main candidates, more of those are going for Biden than for Trump, but they're still tiny numbers. The biggest gain for Biden by far is from non-voters in 2016.
Oh, all right.
Non-voters in 2016 are twice as likely to vote for Biden as they are for Trump.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, 2016
He's plus 24 with 16 non-voters.
Okay.
If you didn't vote in 16, Biden leads by 24 points.
Yeah, well, I mean, the theory of...
And these are likely
2016
voters
was
now,
that
so
Trump
these are
had
voters that are
drawn
going to vote in
all of them
2020.
out. I guess so. If you resisted all of these siren calls to move from non-voter to voter in 2016... it's well. I mean,
For
obviously
whatever
the
reason,
Trump
people
pitch
didn't like
never
Hillary.
did it. Yeah,
Some of it was misogyny, some of it was 30
Sure.
years of, some of it was Comey, some of it was talk radio, whatever it was. But they just couldn't bring themselves to vote for Hillary, but they are bringing themselves to vote for Biden.
yeah.
So
And they couldn't
running
be
a
brought to vote
generic
for
white
Trump.
male works politically.
Okay, I guess so. Although I find it hard. Part that I
At
don't
least
really
this-
understand is the non-voters in 2016. Yeah, I mean, I guess if they're all people who are like, well, I don't like Trump and I don't like Hillary, but what I really don't like is not having a white male that I like or is inoffensive to vote for. If
So
that's
I'll
your
vote for
sole
Jill Stein?
reason, I guess.
Well,
I don't
they
know.
voted for
Well, they're
Gary, whatever
non-voters.
his name is.
That's true. They could have. They didn't. They're non-voters. We know this about them. But it's interesting that, I guess really, though, Trump must have tapped out that reserve because his whole campaign was aimed at bringing out people who were traditionally not voted to be his, secret army or whatever. And if you were unmoved by Trump in 2016 with his appeal directly to you, not likely anything happened between then and now to make you say, you know what? I missed out on that one. I should have jumped on the bandwagon.
Right. So bottom line there is Trump
Gotcha.
has lost a little of his
People
support,
yelled at
but
them for 4 years.
he is gaining. Biden is gaining a lot more than Trump is. Trump stays the same, and Biden gains big
Okay.
over what Clinton had.
Good. Well, that's
He's
how
bringing
you
those
win.
people off the sidelines to vote for him
All right.
at plus 24 compared to what Trump is doing to try to motivate them. And again, the pandemic hasn't played out yet, and through all of this, all of the political analysis, still is based on the conventional wisdom. I saw this on Morning Joe this morning, where Joe Scarborough pontificates and says, "Oh well, we all know things are going to tighten
Oh, well.
in November. What do you think, Mike Barnacle?" And Mike Barnacle says, "Whoa, of course, everybody knows things are going to tighten." And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, what do you think, Mike Barnacle, is exactly how the data journalism industry got started in the first place?
People asking that question. Hey, well, we'll just say, I see. So you got to start something else, right?
Well, maybe there's a better answer than what do you think, Mike Barnacle?
maybe there's
we should
data,
go actually look at polls and see what the numbers show. And oh my goodness, according to that, why should it tighten? It's been super stable for like 3.5 years. Why is it all of a sudden going to tighten in the last couple of months? If anything, it might widen because Trump's got these other issues, including school and the economy and how the pandemic is going, and all of those are going against him.
Yes, this is a bit of an unprecedented situation, but yeah,
And,
I guess
and
that's
by
just
far,
them saying what usually
by far,
happens.
the biggest problem with Trump that people have is he's not very good on race relations.
That's their biggest.
Yeah,
All right,
by far.
good. I'll take
Nobody
it.
think, even his own supporters don't think
Well,
he's particularly good at that.
No, they may be happy about that, but they don't think he's good at it. All right, that's very odd, and I guess people just falling back on things. I mean, it used to serve you well if it's too early in the morning and you don't know what you're doing or you're not awake yet, and Joe Scarborough or anybody else asks you a question like that. It used to be pretty fail-safe to say, well, the race is going to
Well,
tighten.
it's going to tighten, and besides, it's too early to know. Well, if it's too early to know, then you don't know it's going to tighten. There, I run rings about you logically.
Oh, crap. Well, yeah, that's true. But the too early thing always holds. It's still definitely early. You can't disprove that. It's only July. So, yeah, I mean, that's just spouting traditional time-wasting verbal crutches, I suppose.
Right, which in fact may not be true. That's
Oh,
well,
there is
everybody
that.
know. If everybody knows, maybe it's like not true.
Yeah, or we shouldn't tune in to this show.
Maybe it will tighten. We don't know. And so if you're going to introduce uncertainty into how this is going to play out, you have to account, and this was, as you know, my complaint the entire last year. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at what you think is going to be a close race, you not only have to account for the fact that Trump may improve, you also have to account for the fact that Trump's numbers may drop. That's still true today. It's not automatic that things tighten. What if he does even worse? Because the more you look and the closer it gets to the election, people can see how much he's screwing up.
There's that. People might expect some results from
Is
something.
that automatic? We don't know that, but you have to figure that in, and to discount that and say, well, everybody knows usually what happens is this.
Yeah.
Well, that's just like, okay, I don't really understand the pandemic and I don't want to, but I do understand history up until March of this year. So I'm going to go back to that and say, if it weren't for the pandemic, this is what history tells us.
Okay.
If it weren't for World War II, not that many people would have died in 1943.
Probably, yes. That's likely true.
Yeah, and totally irrelevant.
history-ing. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess this also drives everybody's paranoia about it being 2016 again. Why do you think so? Some people will point to various examples. Others will say, I turn on television every day, like I did in 2016, and people tell me the
What do you
things
think
that they
Mike
were going
Barnacle?
to say back then. Yeah.
That's the problem.
It's reruns. So I turn on the TV and they say it's going to tighten. So it's obviously going to tighten, and that's why I'm worried.
Right.
Okay, well, all right. So that's interesting. The data says it's not going to tighten. And what's also interesting is that people say, well, it always used to tighten, and TV tells me that. And also, all people who don't wear masks are dumb because don't they know about science?
Yeah, I mean, the data doesn't say anything about whether it's going to tighten or not.
Consistent.
That's my point. Maybe it will,
Okay.
but we don't know. Maybe it won't. Maybe the gap will get bigger, not smaller.
They're
And
all
then we
about
could,
data on
save
some
that
things.
tweet where you said it was going to, narrow, and then we'll hit you on it in December.
Oh, well, that never works. You can't hold the pundits to account for getting it wrong. No one does that.
Right. But, I could,
Could start.
if people can make a career out of data journalism based on what do you think Mike Barnacle, I think that there's many other careers you can make out of what do you think Mike Barnacle.
Well, you'll have to make your own career now because
And you'll have to do it from home
economy won't
because,
make
like,
one
we're
for
being
you.
ravaged by a pandemic.
Yes, right, and it's something you can do from home, so that's good. Data travels easily. All right. Well, we're stuck in a little bit of a loop here. What can I tell you? But
Well, you know what the other loop is? We're getting past the election days, 100 days away.
yeah, that's true.
It's less than that now.
I think you can. That's another thing. You can say that all summer, even when it's no longer true.
Yeah. North
We're 100
Carolina is going
days
to
from the
start
election.
sending out
No
mail
one has.
ballots in 40 days,
Wow. And 40 nights. Don't forget them.
right? 60
Right.
days, 59 days for Michigan.
And that's how long it's going to take. They should start earlier because I keep reading more and more stories about how the mail system is being slowed down. And
Yeah, hard to know.
theories.
Anyway,
about why that
it's
might
hard
be.
to know because, for example, it happened in New York State, but New York State is so incompetent, I don't know how to read that for the rest of the country.
I don't know. Lots of anecdotal stories about people finding that the mail is much slower, they think, than it used to be.
Well,
and lots of theories about why that might happen.
You know how Betsy DeVos feels about public school? Like she wants to eliminate them and get rid of teachers' unions and replace them with private schools. Let's make you Secretary of Education.
Yeah.
Well, there's a similar guy who
That's
owns,
a big problem.
like private delivery services who now is the Postmaster General.
Ah. Okay,
So
I knew there
that's
was
part
a
of the
guy who
concern,
wanted
yeah.
to sabotage, or who was suspected of wanting to sabotage it, but I did not
exactly.
know exactly why. I mean, I guessed that he must be profiting from it somehow, but he owns it. All right. I mean, how many delivery companies have we got? He's not the FedEx guy.
I don't
He's
know.
not the UPS guy. You got another one?
Oh, there's hundreds of them if you include the people who own small businesses who use those
contract
things,
for
like the
those
UPS
things.
store within my,
Yeah. Okay.
my Mailbox USA store, or whatever you call it.
We'll be paying attention to that. I'm going to schedule that for Thursday.
Okay.
I don't know why, and I will not remember, but we do need to pay some attention to what's going on. And lots of people are writing on it, so there's plenty to draw from.
Right. His name is Louis DeJoy.
Yeah, so who is that guy? I'll make a note, and we'll go read up on him. Lots of people have been saying it will make for good study, and it's a huge problem. And, of course, as we move towards the idea of, we'll avoid the pandemic by voting by mail, a lot of people, of course, saying, well, if they sabotage the mail system, that will just turn the election into a mess, and maybe that's all Trump really wants, since he's going to lose.
So, according to
interesting
Wikipedia, Louis
theories.
DeJoy was CEO of High Point, North Carolina-based New Breed Logistics from '83 to 2014, and retired after his company was acquired by Connecticut-based freight transporter XPO Logistics for $615 million. And following that, he served as CEO of XPO Supply Chain Business in North America, and was appointed to a strategic role on the logistics board of directors, where he served until 2018.
Well, that's wonderful.
So he's been involved in companies, not the big ones, not the UPS, not the FedEx, not the ones you've heard of, but he does
What are they calling
freight shipping
bulk
in
mail?
various and sundry of his previous jobs here. So he's into that.
Okay, I mean, it's sort of like, seems like a different league of delivery, but if you can make a buck, what does he care? Besides which, we're supplying all of our PPE to hospitals from people who've never bought, sold, or made PPE, so why not? You can do it in mail too. DeJoy, huh? How does he spell that? I'm going to look you up.
Capital D-E, capital J-O-Y.
Just plain old, that seems like very unexotic. He must be up to something. All right.
So this is a story, May 7th, 2020, from a site called Government Executive, govexec.com.
Yeah.
New Postmaster General met with tepid response from mailers' employees. Outsider appointment comes just days after Postal Board's most experienced member resigned in protest.
Okay. I mean,
DeJoy has previously worked with the Postal Service as CEO of New Breed Logistics, a company that handles supply chain issues and transportation support, and a significant donor to Trump and the Republican Party.
all right.
He is not a
that
career
makes
postal
sense.
employee.
No. Drop that in Skype links, and I'll include that so everyone can read it. And we'll all get up to date on this guy. I was just sort of like, well, show me the Postmaster General nominee who didn't get a tepid response. Though,
Right.
to be fair, they mostly get tepid responses.
Well, actually, the the Postmaster General got a delayed response with half of the responses lost in the mail.
And one was shredded and delivered in a plastic bag.
And one was returned with postage due.
I don't know if I could name another Postmaster General in the modern era. So, okay. Never mind. Tepid response is probably for everybody. You'll see why but remember, yes, we are reading a Government Executive, where I guess there are occasionally like excited responses to a...
Well, Jerry Connolly, you know Jerry Connolly, he's a Virginia guy.
Mm-hmm.
And we love Virginia. Who oversees the Postal Service as chairman of the House Oversight and Reform Subcommittee on Government Operations, accused Trump of choosing DeJoy for political reasons. He rewards a partisan donor by installing him as the U.S. Postal Service. I guess the Iceland ambassadorship was already taken.
It was.
The Postal Service is in crisis and needs real leadership. This crony doesn't cut it.
No.
So, that's a little background of who's running it. So if there's some doubts about how well the post office is adapting to what Trump claims is a problem, well, it stems from having one of his donors in that particular position. And I think they're,
I need this
reasonable.
to remain a problem.
grounds for, wondering about that sort of stuff.
I do too. We'll have to share those grounds with everybody in the coming days.
Yeah. So,
That's a good start. Thank
what else? AP North poll out. Trump's handling of the coronavirus pandemic approved 32, disapproved 68. Only 2 Americans say the U.S. is headed in the right direction, the lowest figure of Trump's presidency so far. So again, you have all this background stuff. And here's another piece of it that is kind of the opposite of Trump. 2020 attention tracker from Axios. Biden succeeding in making it about Trump.
Okay. All right.
Right?
Yes.
So
That's wise.
the whole deal is that if it's a referendum on Trump, Biden wins.
Sure.
That's
I
the
would think
concept.
so.
So Trump is trying to make it about Biden.
Oh.
And here's an example of how that works. Why it matters, Axios says Trump's punches aren't landing, Biden's avoiding heightened scrutiny while Trump absorbs the blowback for his responses to a national crisis or crises. But here's a good example.
Not a bad
Trump
one.
decides he's going to push the idea that Sleepy Joe is not mentally fit.
Oh, yes, right. Good idea.
So what does he do? He talks about the cognitive test that Trump has aced
Yes.
over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah, like the ramp.
So now, what does Google say when you start looking at searches and mental decline? It's Trump.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's just one example of how he's trying to hit Biden with this, and it's not working.
Yeah. I guess no one will tell him. They're all afraid. Or maybe they do tell him and he just doesn't believe it.
So
like that
even
too.
after emerging from his Delaware basement, Joe Biden has consumed less and less of the national conversation while his polling lead has swelled, according to data from Newswhip, provided exclusively to Axios. Why it matters, Trump's punches aren't landing. Biden's avoiding heightened scrutiny while Trump absorbs the blowback for his responses to national crises, plural. The big picture, the trends speak to Trump's struggles to effectively brand Biden. He's at turns tried to label Biden as corrupt, senile, toothless, and a tool for the, quote, radical left.
And sleepy.
Biden's been able to grow his lead by keeping the focus on Trump, a job made easier by the nationwide surge in coronavirus cases. Do you think?
Well, yeah, I was going to make that sentence shorter. Trump, it's a case made easier by Trump.
Yeah, between the lines, it's not like Biden is becoming more popular. Trump is just becoming less popular.
Yeah. Well,
Biden's favorable ratings
way to do
steady at 45. Trump has fallen from 39 to 34 since March.
And they even
Bottom
throw
line?
the bone about the basement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
As long as Trump remains on the defensive, the harder it's going to be for him to get any of his Biden attacks to stick. Again, he's only got, depending upon who you ask, 50, 60 days left to do it.
Yeah. How come we don't know how many days?
Because it depends which state you're in.
Okay.
Right?
Sort of.
Some states don't have the early voting that
Yes.
other states have.
Right. Okay.
But the voting's starting
so
soon.
It's not time zones.
The voting season is starting.
Yeah. And pretty soon, does that mean finally, how many days until pollsters can no longer ask if the election were held today?
They can always
40.
ask.
Well,
There's the day
they're
after
just
the election.
Not
You can still
helpful.
ask that question.
That's true too. I guess you can ask it. It just won't make as much sense.
Right?
you're
Now,
free
I
to
think
do that in this
justifiable
country.
homicide, if you look it up in the dictionary,
Yes.
is talking about 2024, the day after the election.
But they keep saying that.
We need a day. Right?
Yes.
Give us at least 24 hours. Then we can
guess
concentrate
so.
on what happens next, depending upon who won.
I feel like they've been saying that for a long time, and they are not enforcing that rule.
Right, exactly. So Matthew Dowd, to finish up, points out an interesting thing. Even as low as Trump numbers are, and they are low,
Yes.
he's more popular than the GOP Senate candidates in Michigan, Colorado, Arizona,
Wow.
Iowa, North Carolina, Georgia, Montana,
Really? All that?
yeah, Alaska, and Kentucky.
That's because he's starting from a low point.
Yes,
Wow.
but the point is, like, the senators are even less popular. So
Yeah,
enabling
well, that's
Trump has not
terrific.
helped them, and now they're screwed because they really have no other choice.
Yeah. And that was another of the big stories over the weekend too. I'm sure you saw the complaints from Republican congressmen that there was no help for them forthcoming from the Republican National Committee, which is usually the case, but in this case,
That's always
special
the case.
dynamics here. Yeah. It was an odd place to start from a story, but I guess a lot of these guys who are fairly new And also, I mean, I guess here where you're weaned on a campaign in a box, if the box stops coming or the boxes show up and everything in the box is crazy, you start to wonder, where am I going to get help from? And you've never really had to campaign on your own, and there's been a nationalized campaign behind you that you could depend upon. And once you get there, you never really learn the ropes of how anything works. You might still believe, well, I guess the Republican National Committee will ride to my rescue, and it won't. But there's also the additional layer of this that I guess Kevin McCarthy at some point in the article, is it Washington Post or New York Times? I'll dig it up. But saying that I guess out of a...
Sounds like a Washington Post story.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It's
New York Times doesn't cover Congress that much. They're only interested in the White House.
True. Then I guess out of some sense of showing Trump that he's a team player, I guess he leaned on a bunch of the senior Republicans in the House to donate directly to the Trump campaign, which is also a little odd and not necessarily something people do all the time.
Yeah, but you have to figure it all goes into Trump's pocket.
Yes. And so, therefore, this time it made sense. Well, I understand why, and now I'm being asked to contribute to the campaign. Usually, it's a drop in the bucket. But here, yes, it's still a drop in the bucket, but the bucket is Trump's pocket, and I understand that he'll be motivated by that. So I'll do it. And then now that they're in trouble, they're looking for some help from Trump, and apparently no one has introduced them to Donald Trump until this point. And he has no interest in helping anyone but himself, and they're shocked by this.
By the way, breaking news.
Okay.
Which is to say somebody else broke it. I'm just reading it.
Right. Well, we don't.
Robert O'Brien, who is the U.S. National Security Advisor.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay.
Positive for COVID-19. Closest Trump official to contract the virus.
Cool.
Luckily, he never talks to anybody who has anything to do with national security, so Trump is probably safe.
Yeah, they're all still alive.
But what happens if Trump tests positive? What does that mean for the country?
He lies to the country and says he's negative. I
Like
believe
Bolsonaro?
he's been positive the whole time. He is, yeah. He gave it to Bolsonaro. He gave it to O'Brien. He's given it to all. He gave it to Stephen Miller's wife. He gave it to his. This is interesting. He gave it to his son's girlfriend. So they may have an issue to work out between the two of them. But I think he's had it the whole time, and he keeps lying. I don't know if he did get it. They wouldn't say it until I don't know. Maybe never. But okay, O'Brien. All right, where'd you find that?
It's a Twitter.
Links or didn't happen or
Yeah, okay.
or I didn't happen or
We're
something.
bloggers, aren't we? So Jennifer Jacobs broke that. Let me give it to you.
Okay. Well, she can put it
But
back
there's a
together
tweet.
then.
There's a tweet for that.
Then
There's always a tweet for that.
it's true.
Right.
And probably, she's a
that's
real
basically
reporter.
my summary. Mondays are the hardest show for me because so much happens over the weekend.
Yep.
And I'm not on Friday, so I got Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to sum up, and I try to bring it together in some coherent fashion, which is almost impossible because Trump is all about chaos, and so many different things are happening. But it all really does tie together with the idea
you do a good job
that
with
he's
it.
never really into governing. He's into public relations, and he takes this entire crises management as how can we message, which he does poorly, by the way, but never does either transparency or let's get to the underlying problem. And managing the crisis means managing the thing that caused the crisis. He just doesn't understand that connection.
Yeah. I did see it this morning. He's spending all of 15 minutes a day, perhaps, on coronavirus.
Well, the task force, there's a report that said the task force is going to meet less than 30 minutes a day.
Yeah, because why would you?
And half of it is going to be on messaging.
Right. So
That's
other
where the
half
15
is-
minutes comes from.
The other half is substance, supposedly the substance of what to do. But you've seen the results. The substance are, he says, you got to test less. Well, that's the opposite of what you're supposed to do. But, all right, well, thanks for the policy. And now your national security advisor has COVID-19. Well done. Okay. It's working
Anyway,
great.
that's a story. We'll
good.
do more on Wednesday, probably more on the coronavirus and the numbers in which states and such. Although just to give you an idea, because, it's always good to pay attention to what's going on here. The deaths are stable, plateauing in Arizona, not going down, even though the numbers of cases are going down. The cases are stabilizing but not going down in Florida. They're still going up in Texas. They're plateauing in California. But South Carolina, Louisiana, and Mississippi are the new hotspots for, and Alabama all have rising deaths, which is not good. And then in terms of the actual cases and how they're being reported, again, is a little bit difficult because shortage of testing and 14-day turnaround and such. Florida is past its peak but plateaued pretty high. Arizona's past its peak but plateauing, still pretty high. Texas may be dropping, and California is plateauing. But there are, again, other states besides the big four that really need to be watched, in particular Louisiana and Mississippi. So they're having a ton of cases. We'll just give you that so you can take a look for yourself. So lots to watch. And, of course, it's only Monday morning, and it's early, so a lot of stuff's going to happen between now and our next show. So that brings you to the hour.
I think that does.
And that's good. So I'll be talking with David and trying to interrupt him as best I can on Wednesday.
You may try.
But you've got the show on Tuesday.
Yes, I do. And I will...
I could call and interrupt you, but, what's the fun
You should try that sometime, just for fun.
Yeah, I'm just calling to interrupt you. Bye.
It's quick. It doesn't really do too much damage.
Right.
It's worth it. Although now I think we've blown it. But all right. The point is will be...
We've lost the element of surprise.
Yes, there are
Fear,
people
surprise,
who
and
aren't listening
something
today.
About the Pope, I forget.
Right. Who might just be just as surprised. Or they're very forgetful. It could be possible. The people who've forgotten that you've said that. And I guess I ought to stop mentioning it if we want to preserve any possibility of surprise. Thanks, Greg. And thanks for advanced warning as well. I think you do a very good job summing up long weekends, and I'm appreciative of it. And come back on Wednesday and mop up, if you would. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, let's see. Just checking on the Twitter feed here. Always so much happening here. Brian Monroe noting for us on the question of Postmaster Generals. He says the only Postmaster General, I don't recall this, but the only Postmaster General I can recall was Wilford Brimley on Seinfeld. Was there such an episode? I don't recall that one. But I'll leave it to the Canadians to keep closer tabs on American Postmasters General than the rest of us. Is this current? I just happened to see, oh no, this is yesterday. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a long time ago. But somebody bringing back up the Donald Trump all caps screaming, schools must open in the fall. And I thought that might be current, but no. We'll see. And now that his own son's the only school-age son that he's got at this point, isn't going back to school either, I don't know whether it's going to make any difference. I don't know whether it'll get through to him. I don't know whether he'll just be angry at them, switch his schools, or just ignore it and say, the goal all along was to force your kids back into school, not mine. I don't really care about what happens to you. It's entirely possible that that's always been his aim. All right, let's see. Oh, yes. A small bore story, but a good prediction. Easy. Our prognosticator here, Just Janice, who tweets, I guess, with her first initial J for Janice, and I guess last name Savite. We'll have to take a guess. Is it Savite? Sava? I don't know. But at any rate, many of you probably follow along. And she had a good prediction, though by her own admission, very easy to make, and she included the screen grabs to set it up back 3 days ago, I guess, catching the tweet of Katie Tour from NBC saying, Trump says he thinks, this is interesting, I like the way she put it here. Did Katie report it this way, or did Trump say it this way? Trump says he thinks he's throwing out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium on August 15th. Janice, correctly applying our usual formula here of how to interpret a Trump comment, says there's not a shot in hell that he goes through with it. Now, not certain what drove her to think that he wouldn't go through with it exactly. I mean, if there's no fans in the stands, maybe by August 15th there would be. But if there's no fans in the stands, he can't be booed. So I'm not certain whether that was driving it, or the fact that I've seen pictures of him throwing out the first pitch in the past, and he looks like an absolute idiot. And then he spent a couple of days having his team make fun of Dr. Fauci for having thrown one of the most poorly thrown opening day pitches you're likely to see. Or was it an opening day? It doesn't matter. The first pitch. But anyway, yeah, so she says, not a shot in hell that he goes through with it, and then it's followed up by the AP story from this weekend. Trump now says he won't throw first pitch at Yankees game. He apparently, the claim was that he's too busy with the coronavirus thing and so many other things that he won't be able to do it, but they'll reschedule it for another date. Don't worry, probably 2 weeks, very soon, in a very short period of time. Of course, I guess to further that story, we'll just double back on some of the things we mentioned with Greg. There is, of course, the news that the task force itself is only spending 30 minutes a day, maximum, on coronavirus at all. He's probably not even attending the task force meetings, and only half of the half hour is an address of substantive issues anyway. So it's not coronavirus that's taking him away from throwing the first pitch. Don't know what else he might think he's busy on, but I don't know. Maybe it just might be that he doesn't want anybody to see him doing it. Maybe it was never scheduled and he just wanted to say it was, so it sounded like he was important, or as important as Anthony Fauci. Not sure, but I guess we'll also hold that up against, Bill in Portland, Maine has been reminding everybody that a couple weeks ago, you'll recall, Trump had a rally scheduled for New Hampshire, and he canceled the rally citing a tropical storm / hurricane that was going to make its way all the way up to the tropics of New Hampshire and possibly disrupt his beautiful, beautiful rally. So he called the rally off. The weather never materialized, just like the rally never materialized. But he did promise everybody, we're going to reschedule that very soon. 2 weeks, which is, of course, everyone's signal for not 2 weeks. It's not going to happen, and it may never have been contemplated. And sure enough, the deadline has come and gone. I believe it was Saturday, and Bill was right on the ball in keeping us up to date and counting down the days until the rescheduling would be late, past its promised delivery date. And like I said, true to form, it never did materialize. We'll see if I can't bring that one up. Somewhere we'll find. But I'll make a note to self about Bill's note about New Hampshire rally, and we'll see if I can remember to find that tweet. Or maybe, Bill, you're listening and you can find it and send us a link to it, your countdown, and we'll include it for full credit for you, for everybody else to see. All right, let's see. Back into Pocket and the Twitter stream here. The Twitter stream has all the petty stuff that I think is fun and want to share with people, but the stories of some substance, anyway, are usually parked in Pocket here. Let's see. I got to get through the... I also use it along the way to note those little stories that happen in passing, so I can send them to you later on. Let's see. Where were we with this? We can go to the story I mentioned from the Washington Post from earlier in the weekend about this disconnect between House members and Trump and reality, this triangular disconnect here. House GOP's pleas to Republican National Committee for financial help go unanswered. Though, again, it's my belief that in the regular course of things, the Republican National Committee, particularly in a presidential year, would not be offering any financial help to House Republicans. The chief aim of the RNC and DNC, especially in presidential years, and really always, because it's always a presidential year for them, is paying for the presidential campaign and the conventions that go along with it. Maybe they figured because they weren't having a convention, the surplus cash that might have been otherwise spent on that could be sent to them. But Donald Trump is in office, and he will sit on the pile of gold like a dragon and keep it all for himself. And also maybe it's already all been siphoned off, and they never had any intention of helping anybody or even paying for the convention for that matter. Anyway, this is reported on July 25th by Rachel Bade, Josh Dawsey, and Michelle Yeehee Lee. Senior House Republicans are pleading with the deep-pocketed Republican National Committee. They're pleading with them because they're deep-pocketed, and not because they usually empty their pockets for anybody in the House anyway. And the Trump campaign, though. They're also approaching the Trump campaign, which they perceive to be loaded as well because Trump says he's a billionaire, et cetera, et cetera. Pleading with them to do what? To provide financial help as Democrats vastly outraise the GOP, but top campaign officials are so far declining to commit, because they never do. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has been prodding the RNC to write a check to the National Republican Congressional Committee, a request he has made multiple times. McCarthy specifically, and before we get even further in this, everyone know the players we're talking about. NRCC is the Republican equivalent to the DCCC, the organization that would be chiefly responsible for exercising the strategy and sometimes paying for the strategy of maximizing the number of seats that their party has and holds in Congress, in the next Congress. It's, you get the idea. They're chiefly concerned with their numbers in the House. There's a Senate committee that worries about the Senate side, and then there's the RNC, which generally worries about the presidential race. So they don't usually find a sympathetic ear at the RNC. Likewise, people at the DNC. And we find that that's a mistake that's made fairly frequently. Here we can both sides things on this one. Lots of rank and file, anyway, or, barely interested Democrats and Republicans among the general public think, oh, well, the Democratic National Committee must be the organization which distributes money to Democrats all over the place to run for office. And it's not. Likewise, the RNC doesn't distribute money to anybody either. But this is where it begins to get interesting. McCarthy specifically has asked Jared Kushner. Why? Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, to make a financial commitment to the House GOP, according to several officials familiar with the discussions, who spoke on condition of anonymity to freely describe private conversations. And it seems Kushner has a role in all of this, although no one really can give us a good reason why that might have happened. Kushner, who oversees such decisions, it says it anyway. I mean, ordinarily he wouldn't, but in this administration he does, and has a greater say than RNC chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, has refused thus far, the officials say. While the Trump campaign and the RNC have brought in record amounts of money, some Trump officials see donating to the House as a wasteful investment. This is the funny part. As the GOP's chances of reclaiming the majority sharply deteriorate. So that's funny all by itself. Also funny was the idea that they would put Jared Kushner in charge of anything, but that they would put him in charge of the decision, if there even is one to be made, of whether or not the RNC and or Trump campaign would disperse from its coffers to other people. And I guess there's no chance of that happening. I don't know if you've ever met Donald Trump, but if you have, maybe you've never met Jared Kushner. That guy thought all the PPE that they were importing from overseas during the pandemic belonged to him. And he wasn't very... So now it's interesting. He doesn't just pirate PPE for personal profit. Republicans, in other words, in Congress are learning that he also pirates political donations for his own profit. And golly, now it's getting serious. Anyway, he says no. The meatball says no, and you can't have any money. This is just the way it's going to work. While the Trump campaign and the RNC have brought in record amounts of money, as we said, some Trump officials see donating to the House as a waste of money, which is funny all by itself. Their decline in fortunes can largely be attributed to Trump's sagging support over his handling of the coronavirus pandemic and the sliding economy, which just makes everything even funnier, I guess, right? The guy, in many ways, who's been handed the most responsibility and failed the most has been Jared Kushner, although this is supposed to be Trump's job, but he hands it all off to Kushner, and his handling of the coronavirus pandemic has cost the president, and his handling of the sliding economy has cost the president, but he's going to keep all the money, which could, in the view of the Republicans, cure the fact that this guy effed everything up. But guess what? Now he's going to F this up too, and they'll all fight with one another. Meanwhile, there was really no controversy to begin with because the RNC and the presidential campaigns never give them money. So I'm happy to see this story create a Republicans in disarray theme, but, that money was never coming back to them. Anyway, it goes on, so we might as well enjoy it. The campaign just wants the money. They don't care about the House. It's not their concern, one official close with the Trump campaign said, and he's accurately describing both the way it usually works and the way Trump usually works. When you've been working in politics for years and you understand it's a team sport, you kind of look at these things a little differently. I don't think they see it that way. So this is a official close with the Trump campaign who has every reason to understand that they're never going to send money to Republican House candidates, but still insisting on misunderstanding it anyway for the sake of being in an article anonymously. Okay. Trump has been raking in unprecedented amounts of cash. I would say probably purportedly here, because you never know. Though presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden outraised him in the past 2 months. So that's important to note. The president's fundraising committees and the RNC entered July with a whopping $295 million on hand, which is more than twice the $144 million that President Barack Obama had for his own reelection at the same point in 2012. So Trump considers that a win, and it's a lock now. Now he can slaughter people with the virus and still win, in his mind. In a statement, the RNC said no decision had been made. We have a great working relationship with our sister committees, McDaniel said. Our priority is President Trump's reelection, along with winning back the House and holding the Senate. Transfer requests like these are standard every cycle, and final decisions typically aren't made until after Labor Day. It is totally false to say that anyone is holding up a decision on a transfer commitment. That's probably all correct, and they do from time to time make large transfers as necessary when it comports with the strategy, and sometimes when it doesn't, I guess. But they come late, and transferring funds from the Republican National Committee and or the presidential campaign to the RNC after Labor Day, it's usually to make up for shortfalls that are predicted. You can't really usually deploy funds from RNC to NRCC to on the ground in individual campaign races, individual congressional races around the country in time to make any real dent, but it can come in to cover shortfalls and help mop up after the election. Sometimes. McCarthy declined to comment about his request. The rejection has angered some Republicans, many of whom believe the president has a duty to help the party, not just himself. Well, not this guy. Those familiar with the dispute, who, like others, spoke on condition of anonymity to talk frankly, blame Kushner, because they can't bring themselves, to blame Trump. They blame Kushner for failing to understand the importance of unity and working together, which is their euphemism for money. The refusal to help the NRCC is all the more striking because House Republicans in safe seats recently contributed to the president's reelection, making donations of tens of thousands of dollars at the request of his campaign. And the dumb thing is they gave in to that request because that tens of thousands of dollars was supposed to stay with them. They raised it to run their reelection campaigns, but they made the choice to answer those pestering emails and texts from the Trump campaign, where they're very persistent. And it's interesting. A lot of people, like Democratic analysts, look at these things and say, you're going to dry up your donor base. They're going to stop donating to you. They're very condescending and insulting. You send, generic mass texts to whatever, or, sometimes then they'll be personalized and they show up in emails, David, I implore you to support the president, yada, yada. And then a couple days later, they have a stupid one for follow-up that says, we've noticed you still haven't responded to the president's request. And then even later, it's like, what's up with you? The president has been asking me about your donation. And I guess if anybody falls for that and sends $10,000 as a result, I guess you deserve what you get. But that's the way they're handling things. And I guess all the people who gave away all their money to Donald Trump thought, well, obviously, because he'll have noted my individual generosity and support on his behalf, he'll see that I'm somebody who supports him, and he's loyal. He keeps saying his chief value is loyalty, and he'll turn around and he'll help me when I need it. But why would he do that? One, it's just not in Donald Trump's nature. His nature is to tell people that he loves loyalty and then not to practice it. But, I mean, just even logically, what did you think was going on here? That Donald Trump was running a layaway plan for congressional campaigns that can't control their spending and can't help themselves. If they have too much cash on hand, they'll blow it on popcorn and candy. But the kindly old Trump campaign will come in and siphon off $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 at a time from these irresponsible congressional campaigns and hold it in escrow for you for later, and even help you maybe grow it with interest. And then, I guess maybe these are people who went to Trump University and they all thought Trump really will help me figure out my finances and learn how to become a billionaire just like him. But I mean, the idea that I'll scratch your back, you'll scratch mine is just never going to work with Donald Trump. And I mean, it was a nonsensical plan to begin with. If you needed money to run your campaign and then you raised that money, don't give it away. Use it to run your campaign. But instead they gave it away, and now they're like, why isn't people giving it back to me? And it's because, well, Trump understands that when people give you money to run your campaign, he's going to use it to run his campaign. And it's not because he has integrity or anything. I mean, he intends on stealing that money by running his campaign. He's campaigning not because he wants to be president, but because he wants to steal that money. And he's not going to give up on that commitment. In that sense, he's been very focused and very single-minded. He's like laser focused, not on coronavirus, not on, those bounties that the Russians are paying to kill our troops. That doesn't deserve laser focus. Stealing money, that deserves laser focus. And, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. This is just another example of, I can't believe that this leopard is eating my face. I told you we were going to steal this money. That's why I'm here. Now donate, because I'm very loyal. And like Trump University, I'll teach you to steal money from your campaign. Maybe he even made that promise. And then it turns out, just like Trump University, no, he really isn't even, well, he's certainly not going to teach you anything. And he's not really interested in teaching you to steal money, because then there would be less money for him to steal. But he might also not be capable of teaching anyone how to steal money. All I know is when there's a pile, this is his theory. There's a pile of money. Grab it and run away. There. I've taught you how to steal money the Trump way. Now, the problem is you might want your money back, because anyone could have told me that. I didn't need your advice about that. Yes, but you will notice that you no longer have money, and I do. Does it work? You bet. And they can't seem to argue with that. So I guess they complained to the Washington Post. That's what's happening. The fundraising standoff comes as House Democrats have capitalized on Trump's slumping approval ratings to go on offense, expanding the election map deeper into long-held Republican territory as they seek to increase the size of their majority. House Republicans originally believed they could win back a large number of the 31 Democratic seats in districts Trump carried in 2016, but now the NRCC's top Democratic targets are sitting on million-dollar accounts, making them difficult to unseat. In fact, the DCCC's 42 most vulnerable frontline members have an average 5-to-1 cash advantage over their Republican opponents. Additionally, 30 Democratic challengers outraised their Republican foes in the second quarter of 2020 putting the party in a prime position to grow their ranks in the House. Washington Republicans have learned the hard way that encouraging people to drink bleach doesn't make for the most effective fundraising pitch, boasted Representative Sherry Bustos of Illinois, chairman of, well, or you might say chairwoman, but I guess she didn't. Chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, reveling in the House's GOP money, the House GOP's money woes, and referencing Trump's claim about a treatment for COVID-19. House Democrats have outworked, outhustled, and outraised Republicans all cycle long. Our fundraising advantage is the firewall protecting our majority. Though, you might want to rely on more than just having money. People spend money in very stupid ways. Boat parades, for instance. Senior House Republicans, meanwhile, have been privately panicked about the shortfall, which also extends to their campaign committee. The Democratic Campaign Committee has $94 million on hand, while the Republican Committee has $61 million, a $33 million cash advantage 100 days to the election. Less, in fact. Now, more than ever, Republicans say they need the help of Trump and the RNC. They should try to get as much money as they can, as much as possible, said outgoing Representative Peter King of New York, who said the money shortage has made him glad he's retiring. Democrats, King added, are getting a major boost from the online fundraising platform Act Blue, which helped them win the House in 2018. Republicans, meanwhile, are seeing some of their longtime business donors hold back due to pandemic-triggered economic woes. That part probably true. The earlier part, I guess, depends on your not understanding what Act Blue is, or blowing it off as a comment by saying, well, of course it helps them raise money because it makes it so much easier. But the Republicans, when they say that, are trying to get you to think that Act Blue is doing something illegal here or unusual, when in fact they're doing the most normal and legal thing there ever could be. And if you've ever made a political donation online through Act Blue, in all likelihood, if you made a political donation online, you made it through Act Blue, because there's not that many other actors in the field, but some people take credit cards directly. But, I don't know how much, they're doing a great job there, and they provide a vital service that is making it easy for Democratic campaigns to get set up to accept donations online without having to expend much time or resources. But the idea that there's something, especially as Republicans would have you believe that there's something nefarious about the way Act Blue works, is just nonsense. I don't know if you remember such stories. But if you do, don't forget them, but they're not worth much. Trump campaign and RNC officials have met recently with Republican aides from the Senate and the House to outline their ground game operation and vowed to help with infrastructure and volunteers, but money is another question entirely, and House GOP lawmakers say that's what they need most. We're worried. Even the House Republicans who are doing well, said one senior Republican lawmaker who suddenly finds himself in a competitive race and spoke on condition of anonymity. To be candid, the Democrats are just doing so well. That is pretty interesting. Now, here, I know none of you listening to the show have had any difficulty trying to figure out how to vote in congressional campaigns, or any of them. I'm sure you've made up your mind already. But I'll just throw this out there in case you find yourself talking to Republicans or other weirdos in the future, and discussion might come around to this, or to the other thing that I'm going to relate it to tangentially. Imagine if there were a situation in which the constituents of these very worried Republican members of Congress found that what they really needed, the situation they find themselves in is very unexpected, and they find themselves in dire financial straits. And they wanted assistance, they demanded assistance from Washington, D.C. to bear them through the hard times. And instead of getting the help that they needed, official Washington said to them, no, we believe this is ridiculous. We're not going to give you any money just to bear you through a crisis. Get out there and hustle and do your own work if you want money. Does that sound familiar at all? And what's interesting, of course, is that now all of the people who are begging the RNC to bail them out because the times are so extraordinary and coronavirus and we're in such great danger and our financial straits are making it difficult, if not impossible, to do our regular work. Are returning to the House floor only to say, oh, all these other people who say that they're in extraordinary times and that they're in dire financial straits and they just need an infusion of cash to get them through to the other side are out of their minds. We don't know what they're talking about. They should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Now, give me money to continue saying that. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. By the way, check during the break. I figured this had to be the case. Alcoa, Tennessee, where we were talking about the school difficulties there, and I haven't got an update on what they're doing with their schools. But yes, Alcoa, I guess, is named for the Aluminum Company of America, Alcoa. You may remember their... what were they, like maybe 1990s jingles? The Alcoa, wasn't it? Alcoa can't wait for tomorrow, right? I don't know. Maybe you don't remember. But yes, as the name suggests, we learn from Wikipedia, Alcoa is the site of a large aluminum smelting plant owned and operated by the Alcoa Company, Aluminum Company of America. That's a nice, fun little abbreviation here. Formerly known as North Maryville, the town was incorporated under its present name in 1919. So COVID-19, and 100 years later, they're really in trouble. So there you go. It was a slow-acting thing, but you asked for it by naming yourself after a corporate sponsor, and 100 years after the fact, the retribution has been brought down upon you. I don't think they had anything to do with one another, but who knows? Speaking of other things that don't have anything to do with one another, I understand that possibly the video that went viral yesterday purporting to show that a portion of Donald Trump's cheaply built, but he didn't care because it was all about a kickback scheme, both to himself and to his contractor friends. The shoddily built section of his tremendous, beautiful, beautiful wall that isn't a wall but is rather a bollard fence along the U.S.-Mexico border, blowing down in Hurricane Hannah. Turns out, at least there are some claims, there's a lot of question about the provenance of this video. There's some claim that it was a sandstorm, a dust storm in January that blew it down. But, I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter that much. The fact that wind, even when it's extraordinary wind, the wind could blow down the big, beautiful, impenetrable wall is metaphor enough, really, no matter when it happened. But I guess you would rather be accurate about these things than not accurate. But either way, if God saw fit to blow down the wall, or whoever, then we should take note of it. Just by way of bringing about the idea of divine retribution, even if it takes 100 years in Alcoa, Tennessee. And I don't think really it's fair to hold the children of the current citizens of Alcoa responsible for a poor decision made by their probably their great-grandparents, etc., in 1919. But that's where we now stand. All right, just thought I would figure that one out for you in Alcoa. Is there more from the NRCC story that seems of interest? There's a little bit left to the story, and I see some names coming up in the last half of the story that might give us some raised eyebrows here. But I thought that was really, I thought we could have wound up on that one, that it's how ironic it is for Republicans to be busying themselves with denying help to people who need it in these uncertain times, and then whining that they're not getting help in these uncertain times from someone else. Traditionally, presidents have used their national platform and fundraising prowess to assist Senate and House allies. That is, they've gone around and done fundraisers or endorsed people, but that doesn't mean they disperse money from their campaigns. During Obama's first term, between 2009 and 2012, the Democratic National Committee transferred $7.1 million to the DCCC to fortify House candidates and incumbents, with most of the spending occurring during the midterms. Trump has followed suit as well, though the overall percentage given was smaller than Obama's, under the lead of former campaign officials Reince Priebus, Stephen Bannon, and McDaniel. The RNC gave the NRCC $1.9 million in 2016 and another $8.7 million in Trump's first term, mostly to try to keep the GOP majority. Didn't work. But again, in off years, non-presidential years, they're much more free to do such things. Republicans argue that many vulnerable House GOP incumbents outperformed Trump in their moderate districts, and by helping them, he would be aiding his own reelection bid, although we just did find out that something like a dozen Republican senators underperformed Trump in their states, but this is about the House. So, but it does mean that it possibly is unlikely that they outperform Trump in their districts, but when you break it down into districts, I'm sure there are some somewhere that they outperform them in. They also argue that Trump is awash in campaign cash and could build some goodwill with House Republicans who have steadfastly stood by him, most notably in opposing his impeachment. But of course, I mean, Trump would view this, and quite honestly, these Congress people view it this way too. You don't need to buy goodwill with these people. They're afraid of being the subject of an angry Trump tweet. So there's no reason to build goodwill with them. This is all, in Trump's mind, about them doing his bidding. And quite honestly, because they're authoritarians and campaign-in-a-boxers, they likewise think that their role in Washington is to do whatever the Republican president says and the opposite of whatever a Democratic president might say. So you don't really need to do anything to get them to do that. That's just what they believe they're there for. Some Republicans have speculated that Trump officials are trying to use the money as leverage to ensure Republicans stick with the president. Privately, maybe we'll go back to the old privately GOP lawmakers on both sides of the Capitol have griped about Trump's handling of the pandemic and penchant for stirring up other controversies, including his recent defense of Confederate statues. By holding the money up, Trump officials can ensure loyalty. That's their version of loyalty, said these Republicans, who, like others, spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss private talks. By the way, kind of the opposite, definitionally speaking, of loyalty. If you're doing it for money, then that's it. That's the end of the story. It's not loyalty. It's you're being paid. Of course, if you're not getting paid, but you're licking his boots anyway, that could be misinterpreted as loyalty by this campaign anyway. The refusal also suggests that the Trump campaign is concerned about his reelection. While Trump has shattered fundraising records, Biden outraised him over the previous 2 months, gaining on the president amid the chaos of the pandemic. But while the Biden campaign did not announce its cash-on-hand figures in early July, the campaign, as well as the DNC and other affiliated committees, had $130 million as of the end of May, less than half of Trump's war chest. At the request of Trump campaign officials, McCarthy and other senior Republicans in late May asked GOP lawmakers in safe seats to donate the maximum amount to Trump's campaign from their committees and leadership PACs. Dozens followed through, although the ask is unusual. It is unusual, and it's it's typically not done, and that would be normal practice. But Trump is like, those guys have cash. I want that cash. Why don't I ask for that cash? And there's no reason, there's no basis for it, and there's no precedent really for doing it, but that doesn't matter. You're telling me things I don't want to talk about. I heard they have cash. What's wrong with this picture? And if you puzzle over for too long and say, what's wrong with the picture? I don't have that cash. But you have plenty of cash of your own. I know. But I don't have that cash over there. Is there something they might have in their hands that they could put in my hands that I would then stop caring about them? I mean, this is my big problem is I'm concerned or I'm consumed with jealousy of their dollars. I have more dollars, but they have dollars. I covet those dollars. If they could put those dollars in my hand, I would stop thinking about them so much, and then my mind would be free to concentrate on the campaign. It's good for everyone. Just give me the dollars. So there you have it. At the request of Trump campaign officials, they gave away all their money. The money usually moves in the other direction. The presidential campaign works with the national party committees to support down-ballot candidates from the president's party, said Brad Capel, or Capel, I don't know how he pronounces Kappel, Capel, a campaign finance attorney. It is unclear why House Republicans asked their members to give the Trump campaign amid their own financial struggle. Some took it as McCarthy trying to show he was a team player. He's definitely the dumbest Republican leader in a long, long time. Whenever the big man asks you to do it, you do it, said one House Republican aide who was asked to contribute to the Trump campaign. My question was, do they really need the money? Probably not. I took it as more of a show of force, a show of support and solidarity. And I guess it just depends on how you look at it. I looked at it as more of a request for submission. And they all submitted very strongly to the president, and I guess they justified it in their own minds by saying this is a show of support and solidarity. It is, in fact, a show of submission to the Trump campaign. That's just the way he wanted it. And why it's not coming back to you is you submitted. That's why it's not coming back to you. And they're maybe just now coming to that realization. But as you can see, they also will tell themselves stories so that they can get over it. This wasn't even a Republican congressperson. This is an aide. And they don't make a tremendous amount of money. And he was asked, can you give that small amount of money that you make, can you give a big chunk of it to Donald Trump? Because he's a billionaire. And this guy said, yes, I can. And I think there's good reason to do so. And he did it. And, you know, while other people, I guess, are waking up to the realization, I just gave money to a billionaire. What am I, crazy? This guy says, this billionaire, when a billionaire asks you for money, you give a billionaire money. Why? It's a show of support and solidarity. Maybe he's still stuck in what was happening here is he's still stuck in the Trump University mindset. Maybe I'll gain his notice and he'll give me lots of money and I'll be a billionaire. I mean, I guess that's really just the way Republican politics has always worked at some level. Why tax cuts for the rich? Because that money will trickle down and you'll start a business and you'll become rich. And that at least was, I guess it had the semblance of a policy or the veneer of policy. And so it made some sense. This is just straight up personal stuff. If you give me money, I'll do nothing. I mean, he never made any sort of promise, but I guess the best parallel is Trump University, about which I read a little bit during the weekend as well. What was I reading about Trump University? Oh, yes, David Farenthold back on that beat, generally speaking, I think, tracking down money that Trump has stolen from people. Was that what it was? I don't know if I put away a story on Trump University or not, but yeah, here it is. As a matter of fact, it's a Washington Post piece as well. We're never going to leave the Washington Post, I guess. Is it Farenthold? Yeah. Farenthold, Josh Partlow, and Jonathan O'Connell. I don't have to go too far into this story, but interesting angle. Why bring it back up? Spin, deride, attack. How Trump's handling of Trump University presaged his presidency. An interesting angle. They weren't doing more investigating of the money. That's settled. The courts have said you stole the money, you're in trouble, and you need to pay it in fines and make restitution to some of these people. But this is a political view of it here. The judge, he says, the judge was out to get him. he said. That being Trump, of course. So was that prosecutor in New York, whom he called a dopey loser on a witch hunt. So were his critics, who he said were all liars. Even some of his own underlings had failed him. Bad people, it turned out. He said he didn't know them. Donald Trump was in trouble. Now he was trying to attack his way out, breaking all the unwritten rules about the way a man of his position should behave. The secret of his tactic: I don't care about breaking the rules, Trump said at a news conference. Why antagonize? Because I don't care. Which is the sullen teenager's response to, well, why are you doing this? This is self-destructive. Well, I don't care. I don't even care, man. But everyone's like, oh, he's crazy like a fox. He's really got something there. Why attack? Because I don't care. Because it works for me. Because people normalize what I do. It doesn't work for sullen teenagers, but there's no press coverage of sullen teenagers pressing back on their parents. And I guess if there were, they would both sides it and normalize it. Well, that was in 2016. The article continues. He was talking about a real estate school called Trump University. You remember it. Trump University, which shut down in 2011 after multiple investigations and student complaints, was treated as a joke by many of Trump's political opponents, much as they treated Trump steaks or Trump vodka. But to those who knew the school well, it wasn't a joke. It was a premonition. The saga of Trump University showed how far Trump would go to deny rather than fix a problem, they said, a tactic they have now seen him reuse as president many times, including now in the face of a worsening pandemic. I will just point out again for the record, it's a tactic they have seen him use and reuse many times before even announcing that he was going to run for president. It was all there on the record, and we just decided to say, and then watch the press normally. We didn't. We knew what was going on, but the vast majority of the country apparently had never learned this lesson. For months, President Trump promised something wonderful, but extremely unlikely, in this case about the virus, that the virus would soon disappear. Of course, I promised beautiful, beautiful health care, build a beautiful, beautiful wall, Mexico will pay for it. I mean, none of that comes to fruition, right? John Brown, a former Trump University student from New York, says he understands why some people believed him. I think this does make an interesting read in parallel with the story of how the Trump campaign duped Republican congressmen who supposedly, you would think ordinarily, if you didn't know what we as listeners to the show know about how stupid most Republican congresspeople are and how they just bought a campaign in a box and don't really know. They didn't work their way up to national politics in the main. Some did, but most didn't, and learn the ropes and really figure out what they were doing there and become political operators. So maybe we can point to that when we're trying to figure out how does somebody who I think most people would ordinarily think it would have to be very savvy about politics at a national level get fooled into giving away their campaign money to Donald Trump. And he just bamboozles people. That's what he does. This is how people get sucked in because they want it, Brown said. Remember the former Trump University student? That's what happened to me. He wanted to succeed so badly that he paid $25,000 for a Trump University mentorship program, which left him deeply disappointed. And isn't that what members of Congress have just done? They paid $25,000 or whatever it is they gave for a Trump mentorship program. Well, he'll be loyal to me now. He'll help me win re-election. He knows magic. He won the 2016 presidential campaign, even without winning the most votes and without anybody believing that he was competent in any way or that he had any kind of a plan or that he couldn't stop attacking Gold Star families or all women or that he had been credibly accused of sexual assault and rape several times, but he still won. I want his mentorship. I mean, I guess, right? But here, parallel situation. He paid for a mentorship program. It left him deeply disappointed, just like these Republicans now. Another former student, Bob Guilo, said he felt a deep frustration at being unable to prevent Trump University's saga from playing out again on a far larger stage. Bob Guilo, not famous, but could have been if we had listened to him. He would have correctly predicted everything in the Trump presidency. I tried to warn the American people that if Donald Trump was going to do this to me, he's going to do the same thing if he's ever elected president, Guilo said. It's Guillo if you want to look him up. probably got no track record. But on the other hand, they're asking Mike Barnacle what's going to happen. He doesn't know, and he's wrong, and he says dumb crap, and we all swallow it. But Bob Guilo, why not give him a column? Because he got it right. Well, anyway, he said he tried to warn everybody, and he was referring to interviews and TV appearances that he did during the 2016 election. You probably missed them all. Unfortunately, people believed Trump, and they didn't believe Bob. Now, many former students, instructors, and lawyers who sued Trump wonder whether, as he faces a worsening pandemic, they see parallels to another chapter of Trump University's story, its end. Eventually, they said, Trump's attacks could not conceal the huge gap between Trump University's promises and its results. He began to lash out, attacking his antagonists as conspirators and fools. It's something I think about all the time, said Tristan Snell, who was the lead attorney, you might remember that name, for the New York State Attorney General's office in a lawsuit against Trump University. Snell said the school had a fulfillment problem. It could not deliver on the enriching real estate secrets it promised. Maybe that's a good metaphor for what's happening in America. We have a fulfillment problem, he said. You've sold X and Y and Z, and you can't actually fulfill the order. Or maybe you're trying to buy PPE and you can't get that. I don't know. And it's because his son-in-law is stealing it all. In this case, Snell said, what Trump promised but cannot provide is not real estate secrets. It's something even harder to deliver, victory against a deadly disease. Well, it's never likely to work. The difference this time is the fact that he's running his game on a virus, Snell said, and the virus doesn't care. We've heard that before. Trump settled 3 lawsuits against Trump University in 2016 after his election. Didn't undo his election. Should have, by all rights, but didn't. Trump University paid a total of $25 million, but did not admit fault on claims that customers were defrauded by the school. When the Washington Post asked about Trump University recently, the Trump Organization sent a statement that focused on the lawsuits. It said, after several years of litigation, Trump University was amicably resolved and settled by the parties with no admission of any liability. Kimberly Benza, a Trump Organization spokeswoman, said in an email, we remain confident that we would have absolutely prevailed had the case proceeded to trial. The White House did not respond to requests for comment. I wonder if Kimberly Benza is related to A.J. Benza. Not sure. The questionable tactics used by Trump University did not diminish some former students' opinions of him, believe it or not, any more than political setbacks have upset his base. Some interviewed for this report said Trump's political record was good enough to outweigh their bad experience at Trump University. Trump 2020, said Michael Sheehan of New York State, who should be run over with a steamroller. But don't do it, even if you do have a steamroller. In 2009, Sheehan paid $1,495 to attend a 3-day Trump University seminar at a Marriott in Albany, New York. Then discovered it was one long sales pitch for more expensive programs. Trump was a big sham, Sheehan wrote in 2012, summing up his experience in a court affidavit. 8 years later, he says, Trump 2020 for some reason. Guess it happens. Now, Sheehan said he doesn't blame Trump for Trump University. The instructors were probably at fault, he said. I don't think he, Trump, sat there and said, hey, I want you to rip everybody off. He did, though. This year, he doesn't blame Trump for the worsening coronavirus either. Trump's enemies are probably at fault, he said. You don't think it's very convenient that the pandemic arrived in an election year? He learned a lot, didn't he? But others said they felt the experience showed Trump was willing to use his reputation as a tough, heart of gold billionaire against them. When did he get a reputation as a heart of gold billionaire? To use it against them and to ask them to believe him over their own instincts. It works, you know. Stephen Gilpin was one of Trump University's instructors. He recalled sitting in on another instructor's class shortly after joining the school in 2007, and it was nothing more than an upsell, he said, laden with false promises on top of it all. I thought, oh my God, we're all going to be arrested, Gilpin said. Now he and others said the Trump administration is trying a similar tactic again by asking people to believe Trump's rosy predictions about the pandemic in the face of an increasingly grim reality. It's the same thing he does today, said Gilpin, who left the school in 2011 when it closed, so Not like he was a great moral hero or anything. His behavior has now become our norm. Trump University began in 2005 when Trump was at the height of his fame from television's The Apprentice. Trump invested about $2 million and took near complete control over the school. Oh, it was all not his fault. It was underlings. Near complete control over the school, according to court filings by the New York Attorney General's office. One executive said in his deposition that Trump personally approved all the ads. The basic sales pitch of Trump University was one that Trump would reuse in his 2016 campaign. The billionaire had made enough money for himself. Now he would put his famous brain to work for the little guy. Come on, America, pull yourselves up, Trump said in one newspaper ad in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. In the ad, Trump said real estate was where millionaires were made. And now I'm ready to teach you how to do it. But Trump, the billionaire, still wanted them to pay. And I love this. This part is very prosperity gospel, if you will. The costs ranged from $1,500 for a 3-day seminar to $35,000 for a Gold Elite mentoring program. One instructor, James Harris, justified the charges this way, according to a 2008 transcript of a class held in Atlanta that was later filed as an exhibit in the lawsuit. Ready? The money wasn't for Trump's benefit. It's for the student's benefit. And again here, the money is a payment. The student doesn't pay Trump for Trump's benefit. The student pays Trump for the student's benefit. They had to pay Trump, he said, to show that they were investing in themselves. It's actually pretty smarmy and clever, right? He's doing this so you assume personal responsibility for doing the work, Harris said, according to the transcript. Harris did not respond to questions sent via email for this report. In 2016, he told the Post, I was told to do one thing as a Trump University instructor, make sure everybody bought more Trump University seminars. That is it. I guess he was good at it. At Trump University, saying yes didn't stop the pressure, right? By the way, even if you say yes and give his campaign money, it's going to keep happening. As Republican leaders would later learn when dealing with Trump himself, saying yes once wasn't the end, it was the beginning. I'm like a sheep led to slaughter, Dean said. I think I missed out on who Dean was here. But she's identified in a photo above. Valley Dean, a retired public school teacher who bought into the Trump University program. In Richmond, Dean said she was told she should take another class in Houston on tax liens. It cost $9,997. She paid. In Houston, they told her Trump University had a great investment opportunity for her in Biloxi, Mississippi, which required a $23,980 payment. She paid again. In the end, Dean said she wound up with no property in Mississippi, no valid tax liens, and not enough skills to become a real estate investor. She had paid more than $30,000 borrowing from her tax-sheltered annuity to do it. It was a bitter thing for me. Here I am, a lowly school teacher, a public school teacher. Donald Trump is, according to him, a very rich man, Dean said. Now here I am having to pay money back for enriching someone that's already rich. She complained in a letter to the Justice Department that was submitted as evidence in the New York Attorney General's lawsuit. Trump University attracted more than 5,000 paying customers, according to court papers, and took in more than $42 million in revenue. Trump himself got back his $2 million investment and got $5 million in profit on top of that, according to filings from the New York Attorney General. But there was a problem: disgruntled students. And it goes on from there to describe the nature of the lawsuits, all very interesting and all something that you should probably take some time to review, since we can't take the time to review it here and now, as it is time for us to wrap up. But you will absolutely recognize a lot of the tactics that he used in trying to get himself out of trouble. It didn't really work. He ended up in trouble, but I'm sure he views the lawsuit as ultimately a success because there was a settlement and he didn't have to admit any wrongdoing. He parted with some money, but as part of his billionaire legend, he can pretend that he didn't care about that and he didn't need the money in the first place. But also, it's very interesting. It's a very petty kind of grift. I mean, it's a couple $1 million. That's great, but more money could be made elsewhere with less effort, I think, if you know even half of what you're doing, than to pull this scam. But whatever. This is the one he decided to do, and I guess it served him well because eventually the same tactics made him president of the United States. How extraordinary. All right. Well, we'll be back tomorrow to catch up on some of the stories we didn't get to today because I was more fascinated by these other ones. But as usual, you can stay tuned for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam next, and he will update you on all the things that we decided to skip today. For instance, Bill Barr has a lot of explaining to do in his upcoming testimony in front of the House tomorrow. A lot of explaining to do about his actions and how he runs the Justice Department. If he runs it, we don't really know. Can't tell for sure. On the rest of the menu, bypassing a judge's blockade, ProPublica published the disciplinary records of the NYPD, the police department in New York, of course, because they were not named as a party to the police union lawsuit. Very clever, good legal thinking, I think.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
This is good thinking, I think. Technically, we're not named in this lawsuit. It's for someone else. We can publish these things, so they did. The fight for police-free schools has been years in the making, and South Dakota's federal coronavirus relief funds went to law enforcement instead of to everybody else. How interesting is that? Putin back in the news, too. Stay tuned to find out why. Next.